for people who like to worry, and I think there's some people who really kind of take a little pleasure and enjoyment out of it because they do it so often, conditions have never been better for these folks than they are right now. There's so much to worry about. In fact, I think it's time that we have a new game show. It's going to be called Jeopardy for Worrywarts. You know, we have Celebrity Jeopardy, but this is Jeopardy just for worrywarts here. It would be, you know, you'd hear somebody say, I want to take crazy world leaders for 100. Well, he takes pictures of himself without a shirt, riding his horse, and he is invading the Ukraine as we speak. Who is Putin? Okay, so you control the board. Give me crazy world leaders for 200. He uses bombs and chemical weapons on his own people. Who is Assad? Yes, you control the board. I want crazy world leaders for 300. He shoots off missiles and has an atomic bomb. Who is Kim Jong-un? Oh, very good. Now, the reason that, if you watch the news, I mean, you've got good reason to worry about crazy world leaders. And that is why we're going to start studying the book of Daniel. Because Daniel has a crazy world leader who would be the daily double on that show. And we're going to learn about a crazy world leader who makes Kim Jong-un look like a kindergarten teacher. This guy is tremendous. So we're going to meet some interesting people in the book of Daniel. The setting is very interesting, especially given today's culture and today's news. The crazy world leader we're about to meet is named Nebuchadnezzar. I'm sure you've heard his name before. He's mentioned many times in the Bible. But do you know where his headquarters was? He was headquartered in Babylon, but where's Babylon? Well, it is in modern-day Iraq. In fact, it's 59 miles from Baghdad, the home of some other crazy world leaders in recent times. So it's so interesting how this took place thousands of years ago, and there's so many connections to what's happening in the world today with what's going on right now. Nebuchadnezzar ruled Babylon for 43 years, longer than any other king. He's credited with building the famous Hanging Gardens of Babylon, considered one of the wonders of the world in this day. In fact, he built most of Babylon, tremendous building projects that he carried off. And in 605 BC, 600 years before Jesus Christ was born, he conquers Judah, the southern kingdom of Israel, and he carries off a bunch of captives, including a 15-year-old boy named Daniel, who was apparently from noble birth, and he carried him off with some of his companions. The plan was to sort of train these young boys in Babylonian language and culture, and to kind of have them, use them to try to control all of these other Israelites, maybe even send them back as sort of a puppet king to control Israel and these sort of things. But he, after Babylon conquered Judah, they put some people there to kind of watch over Judah while they carried these captives back to Babylon. And the people of Judah kept rebelling against Babylon. And every time they did, Nebuchadnezzar would send down his general with his armies, and they would destroy Jerusalem more, and they'd bring more captives up. And at one point in 586 BC, after one of the worst rebellions, Nebuchadnezzar told his general to completely destroy Jerusalem, including the beautiful temple that Solomon had built. And they took all the gold and everything out of that temple, and they took that back with them. And not only was that great value to them, but what it really represented was that the God of the Babylonians, had defeated the God of the Israelites. And that's what it felt like to the Jews. Can you imagine what those Jews were thinking, the Israelites at that time, when their nation had been defeated, their king had been defeated, their temple had been destroyed, and many of their people were now captives in Babylon? It had to feel like God had lost control, that God had been defeated, and that all hope was gone. It's actually a feeling a lot of people have today as they look at the world. They think things are spinning out of control. There's all these nations with crazy world leaders, and they're at any time, any one of these could set off world events that could destroy everything. And so there's a great deal of fear, but there's also a great deal of despair. And one question people ask is, where's God in all of this? Why isn't he taking care of all of this? And this book of Daniel is going to speak to a lot of those questions. Nebuchadnezzar, later on in his life, went completely insane. For 7 years in his life, we'll read about it later when we come to that chapter, but it was actually a direct punishment from God because of his arrogance. He completely lost his mind for 7 years. And at one point, he had all of his advisors killed because they couldn't interpret his dreams. At another point, he built a huge gold statue to himself, and he would kill anybody who didn't bow down and worship him. And then when he went completely mad, he grazed out in the field with the cows for 7 years. So when we talk about crazy world leaders, this is kind of a whole new level of crazy when he's grazing out in the field for 7 years. People would say, where's the king today? Well, he's out with the heifers. He's grazing back there in the lower 40. So that's what Israel was dealing with at that point. So when we talk about why we should study Daniel, I want you to know why the book of Daniel was written. It wasn't written to show that God had lost control and that the other nations had defeated God. It was actually written to encourage the Israelites, to encourage them to say that God has a bigger plan going on here than you can see. And his plan is perfect, and he is working his plan out even when everything seems to be going wrong. And I think that's a message that we desperately need right now in this country, that God has a bigger plan. And people get so upset if the wrong person wins the election. I mean, wrong in their mind, that's going to change every 4 years. If the economy goes bad, and if world events go bad, they get so upset. But what this book is telling us is that God has a perfect plan that is in action right now. And he is working out that perfect plan toward his perfect ending. And Daniel is going to reveal a lot of that to us. The word Daniel, the name Daniel, means God is my judge. And Daniel understood that God was his judge, and God was the only one that he had to answer to. So when Nebuchadnezzar, this mighty king, and the people that Nebuchadnezzar put in charge tried to make Daniel eat Babylonian food and do all the things the Babylonians did, Daniel refused because he said, God is my judge. I answer to God alone. And Daniel was faithful in the most difficult circumstances. And for that reason, he's going to be a role model for us, and as to how we can live in a time when this world just seems to be insane. Daniel made the most of his exile. He went there, I told you, when he was probably 15 years old. He was there for 70 years. 70 years he lived in a foreign country. And he never complained about this. He was not bitter. He didn't lose his faith. He made the most of that exile for those 70 years. He very quickly rose to the role of statesman, and he was officially appointed by the king to one of the highest positions there. He was an advisor to kings, not just the Babylonian king, but later the Persian king. And he also served as a prophet of God. We know that Daniel was the writer of this book because Jesus Christ spoke about him by name. It's in Matthew 24. Jesus said, "So when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation spoken of through the prophet Daniel." Now that whole abomination that causes desolation. Daniel was indeed a prophet, and he foretold many of the things that were to come, and we're going to get into some of his prophecy as we go through the book. But Jesus Christ himself said that was spoken through the prophet Daniel. So we know that he was the author. Daniel is mentioned in Hebrews chapter 11. It's sometimes called the Hall of Faith because some of the great men and women of the Old Testament are listed and for their great acts of faith in Hebrews 11. But Daniel's not mentioned by name. He's kind of lumped together in this. There's a passage in Hebrews 11, 32 and 33 that talk about the prophets who through faith accomplished these things. And one of the things that they did was They stopped the mouths of lions. And I think you all know about Daniel in the lion's den. And so this, without mentioning his name, is talking about one of the great acts of faith in the Old Testament was by Daniel himself. Daniel contains essential prophecy. When I say it's essential prophecy, I believe that Daniel is the key to understanding the book of Revelation. In fact, kind of my secret plan is that after we study this book together for a number of weeks, later on, maybe in the fall, we're going to take on the book of Revelation, but having this as our background and of prophecy. So I need you to stay with me through this as we study this prophecy, because when we take on the book of Revelation, this, I believe, is going to be the key to help us understand that very difficult book of Revelation. 9 of the 12 chapters in the book of Daniel relate revelation through dreams and visions. So what Revelation is to the New Testament, Daniel is to the Old Testament. In Babylon, Daniel received God's word concerning the successive stages of Gentile world domination. He has this amazing vision that shows exactly what countries are going to be dominating the world from the time of Nebuchadnezzar all the way up to the time of Jesus Christ. And of course, those things came true exactly as Daniel prophesied. He prophesied that the greatest king of all, the greatest conqueror, the Messiah, was going to come and defeat all of these other kings. And that he would raise his people. One day, even though right now the people of God in Israel, it seemed to Daniel, the people of God were without a king. One day, the King of Kings was going to come and gather his people together, and he was going to rule the entire world, in fact, rule the entire universe. So he was foretelling the first coming of Christ, and he was even foretelling the second coming of Christ. He was foretelling events that have not yet come to pass. Theologians call these prophecies the already, not yet. They've already been fulfilled in part, but not yet in full. So these prophecies are amazing. The central theme of Daniel, and this really will help us to stay on track and not go down the rabbit trails. The central theme of Daniel is this phrase I introduced to you a few minutes ago, the silent sovereignty of God. The fact that God is in control of all of these world events, and he's working behind the scenes, oftentimes when you can't see any sign that he's working, but he is behind the scenes working so that his perfect plan will be accomplished in the end. I'm going to give you a couple of key verses today that really help us to understand the big picture, and one of those is in Daniel chapter 2, verse 20. We'll put this up on the board in front of you here. Praise be to the name of God forever and ever. Wisdom and power are his. He changes times and seasons. And look at this next line. He deposes kings and raises up others. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. What an amazing picture of God, isn't it? This is Daniel, and he is serving under this crazy world leader, Nebuchadnezzar. But Daniel recognizes that God is the one who places kings on the throne, and at the perfect time, God will take that king off of that throne and replace him with somebody else. And God has done that throughout history. So when you look right now at the world events and you look at people who are in leadership and you say, oh no, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Just keep in mind, God can take them out of that position at any time. And he will take them out of that position at the perfect time. So trust him on that. Don't panic. He says he gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. We desperately need wisdom today. We need leaders with wisdom, and we need leaders with discernment, because there is great evil and there's great deception going on. You need wisdom. I need wisdom. And he gives wisdom and discernment to his people. He says he reveals deep and hidden things. One thing that is hidden from everybody is the future. We have no idea what tomorrow brings, much less next year, 10 years from now. So he revealed to Daniel what was taking place at that moment, the present, as well as what was going to take place the next year and the next year, on 600 years in the future and farther. He revealed what was the hidden things. And it says he knows what lies in darkness. You know, man fears darkness because of the unknown, but God knows what lies in the darkness. And that's why he walks through the valley of the shadow of darkness with us, because he knows what lies in the darkness. And we know that when we're with him, we don't have to be afraid of anything. I want to give you a little taste of his prophecy in chapter 2 of Daniel, one of the key verses here. It's verse 44. In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. Now, Daniel had just revealed a whole series of kingdoms that was going to take place before the Messiah would come, from Nebuchadnezzar on. And he was saying that when this kingdom comes with the Messiah, it's going to crush all of the other kingdoms, and this kingdom is going to reign forever and ever. This is the great prophecy of the reign of the Messiah, the reign of Christ. Let me show you one other key passage in Daniel that will help us to kind of know what we're moving into when we read this book. It's found in Daniel chapter 4, just 2 verses, 34 and 35. We read, "His dominion is an eternal dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the peoples on earth are regarded as nothing. He does as he pleases with the powers of heaven and the peoples of the earth. No one can hold back his hand or say to him, 'What have you done?'" What Daniel's saying right here in this passage and through his book is that God's perfect plan is going to be accomplished. There is no human being powerful enough to change God's plan, to slow it down or to change it in the slightest way. Because God is all-powerful, and his plan is absolutely perfect, and it will be accomplished as he wants it to be accomplished. His timing will be carried out as he wants it to be carried out. So don't worry when you see evil in this world. Don't worry when you hear that evil is winning the day. When people say that God has lost control, God has always been in control. He was totally in control when Nebuchadnezzar conquered Judah, and he's totally in control today. Now, contrary to what Israel observed, God had not suffered a defeat. It looked like it. It appeared that God had been defeated. It looked like the Babylonian God had defeated the God of the Israelites, but that was not true. That's how things appeared. And sometimes things appear to us things are not always as they appear, is what I want to say. You might look out at the world and everything might seem very plain as to what is going on, but things are not always as they appear, as it was with the Israelites. They were just wrong in so many ways. One of the things that Daniel does that we're going to follow in this book is that he gives this incredible timeline from his life and the life of Nebuchadnezzar to the birth of Jesus Christ. And he does it with such specificity. He lays out the numbers in such a way that are so perfect that it's just mind-boggling. It's something that only God could do, because at the time he wrote it, this was all the unknown future. He showed how Babylon had come along and conquered Assyria before, the nation that had carried away the northern kingdom of Israel about 20 years earlier. Assyria was conquered by Babylon. Babylon would be conquered by Persia. And in fact, God raised up this pagan king named Cyrus of Persia to come in and conquer Babylon. And Daniel's even going to be an advisor to Cyrus, an advisor to Persia after Babylon is wiped out. But then he prophesies that Persia is going to be defeated by Greece. And all of you from world history remember that youngster named Alexander the Great who came along and fulfilled this prophecy that Daniel said he was going to conquer Persia before, hundreds of years before Alexander the Great was born. He even prophesied that Rome was going to come and conquer Greece. And he was going to take this right up until the time of Christ and the very birth of Christ. He's going to describe the Messiah with some great terms. He's going to describe him as a stone in chapter 2. He's going to describe him as the Son of Man in chapter 7. He's going to describe him as the Anointed One in chapter 9. The Anointed One is where we get the word Messiah. In fact, chapter 9 is going to provide that chronological framework from Nebuchadnezzar to Christ. He's going to talk about these 70 weeks. You'll have to wait until we get there when we unpack what that means, the 70 weeks. But I just want to give you that kind of teaser from up front. You will be amazed when we unpack the 70 weeks in chapter 9. There's a second theme that's woven into the book of Daniel, and that is a display of God's power through miracles. You know, you might have this idea that the whole Bible is just chock full of miracles from beginning to end. It's not really the case. The fact is there are about 6 periods of miracles in the Bible that come in certain moments, in certain groups. And then there'll be a long period without miracles. And then there'll be another time of miracles. Well, Daniel is one of those times of miracles. And you're going to see miracles in here where God uses his own hand to write a message on the wall. And then he gives Daniel the interpretation of that message. You're going to see where he rescues 3 men who are thrown into a fiery furnace. I think you know that story. And you're going to see the miracle when he protects Daniel from the lion's den. And he's going to give numerous supernatural prophecies in this book. Here's an amazing fact. In the Daniel chapter 11 alone, there are over 100 supernatural prophecies about things that would occur after they were written that have already come true. Over 100 in one chapter alone. This book is just full of amazing prophecy. So I believe that Daniel and his companions are great role models to us today. Because one of the questions we have is, what are we supposed to do right now? As Christians, with crazy world leaders and all kinds of things to be afraid of, what are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to behave in these situations? Daniel is a great role model because he was faithful to God in the most difficult times. So I'm hoping that in the next few weeks as we study this, that you'll see Daniel as a man that you can follow his example. You can have his faith and his courage to stand up for God and be faithful to God no matter what the circumstances, and see that God will honor you for your faithfulness. Daniel lived in a pagan society. He was carried off into a pagan society. He lived in a world that had gone mad. He lived in a world very much like today. And we need this wisdom. We need this role model. So if you stay with me for the next few weeks, I believe that he's going to give us some insights that are going to help you on a daily basis to live for God in a world gone mad. Let's pray together.